just going to turn this up a bit. Welcome, everybody. Happy New Year 2022. And I'd like to call the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness for January 12th, 2022 to order. I'd first like to recognize that we are on the traditional territory as the Nemo First Nation. So I'd like to know, is there any introduction of late items? I had a late item, and that was something carried over from our last agenda on the Nanaimo Aquatic Center water feature review. Is that possible to do today?
I can provide a verbal update if we can fit it in today.
And if I may, wasn't it a video or something, or? Oh, it wasn't the, okay. Well,
no video.
Okay. Okay. So I'd like to call for adoption of the agenda as presented. Moved by. Okay, perfect. Thank you. And agenda as amended, moved by Rachel and seconded by Jocelyn. All those in favor? Thank you. And adoption of the minutes, item 4. Any questions or errors or omissions? Seeing none, for mover of the minutes. Moved by Cheryl, seconded by Deborah. All those in favor? Thank you. So for the first presentation, item 5A will be a verbal update with the Bevan Pool accessibility audit. And over to you, Lynn.
Okay, thank you. So last year, accessible built environment, ABE Factors, was hired to do an accessibility audit of Bevan Pool. And today we have 2 staff members from ABE here, and they'll be able to answer any questions after I give you a verbal update. And so I'm going to give you a high-level overview of the findings, but I would like to introduce you to Samantha Prue, if you can just give a wave. And,
hello, everybody.
Thanks. Samantha is actually the individual who came to Nanaimo and conducted the accessibility audit for us. And I think your colleague Christina is here too.
She is.
There she is. Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
You're here from Korea.
Happy to be here.
I hear.
I am. That's correct.
That's fabulous. Thanks for joining us. So it's nice to have you both here. This is our Accessibility and Inclusiveness Committee. So I'll give them a high-level overview, and then I'll let the floor be opened up for questions. And then Samantha and Christina, just so that you know, after we're finished discussing this item, you're welcome to leave. You don't have to stay for the whole rest of our meeting. Okay?
Perfect, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. So the reason staff chose this facility, the Bevan Pool, is because it was still closed due to the COVID pandemic, and we were getting a number of things done at the facility. So we thought it was a good opportunity to take advantage of this closure and have an accessibility audit completed. And then we thought that this would give us the opportunity to see what it was like having an audit done and have a format that we would be able to use on future facilities going forward. So the information provided in this audit is intended to support the city in making informed decisions around how to improve accessibility for clients and for staff at the facility. The evaluation criteria referenced included information from the 2018 BC Building Code, the 2020 BC Accessibility Handbook, the 2014 Guidelines for Pool Design, the City of Nanaimo Accessibility Requirements for Persons with a Disability Guide, and the Rick Hansen Foundation Accessibility Certification Survey Criteria. So those were all the standards that this audit was conducted against. The report outlines the items that meet minimum requirements of the evaluation criteria, as well as items with deficiencies. All items with deficiencies are permitted to remain in their existing condition unless renovations or upgrades are proposed. And the audit took into account the immediate parking area, the path of travel from the parking area, and the path of travel from the transit stop to the building, the facility entrances, and then all normally occupied spaces within the building. And so I thought that I would just give you the key areas that were reviewed and then one example of an item that was good and but also maybe had a deficiency that could be improved on, just to give you an example of some of the things that you would see in this report, which by the way is very thorough. It's very, I just have a visual here to show you. It's over 70 pages. It's very thorough and it's very technical, which is why I'm not sharing the report and I'm just giving you a few highlights from it. So a few examples: the parking and passenger loading area. The audit determined that we have sufficient accessible parking stalls, but wider, more demarcated access aisles and dedicated curb ramps from each stall would be good improvements. In terms of the exterior and entrance area, the main entrance is power operated and other entrances into the facility could benefit from the same with more elongated push pads. The interior circulation and services, we have seating areas in the lobby which offer a space to lounge or wait, but they could benefit from a greater variety of options of seating and then some differentiation between from the seating areas and the paths of travel, for example. The washrooms, showers, and change rooms. We have universal washrooms, which have a fair level of accessibility, but could benefit from more features, such as L-shaped and fold-down grab bars, smaller exposed style toilet roll dispensers, and accessible height sinks, as a few examples. Wayfinding and signage. We have signage which is installed at frequent intervals, but could benefit from more consistency, larger text, increased color contrasting, glare-free surfaces, and tactile components. Emergency facilities, accessible emergency egress due to being on the main level, but the emergency systems are limited, such as no visual fire alarms, no emergency text notifications, identification of accessible routes, and instructions should be mounted at an accessible height range. And then there were additional amenities that were reviewed, such as the spa, the variety of pools there, and the lift mechanism for getting in and out of the pool. So like I said, it's a very comprehensive document, over 70 pages. In terms of the city staff, our next steps are to review the recommendations, make an implementation plan, and develop a financial strategy to support the ability to implement some of these changes. And I have a meeting set up with key staff in the next couple of weeks to do that review and assess these recommendations. And now I would just like to turn this over for a question period and see if you have any questions for Samantha or Christina that they could answer for you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. So the first hand up I see is Sandra.
I think the group knows my passion because of my lens with accessibility in bathrooms. And I'm curious if there were some really good points with accessibility in universal bathrooms. What I am curious about, of course, is I have a child who continues to need diaper changing and is not an infant. And was that part of your scope in terms of recommendations?
It was actually. So we looked at everything from baby size change tables to adult size change tables and the implementation of. And that actually comes from, it's not a code related item, right? So adult size change tables aren't recognized in the BC Building Code, but because we took into account other technical measures such as RHFAC, they do recognize adult size change tables and the need for them within washrooms.
Does that provide examples as well as to what facilities would be required, like just to help the city out, right?
Yeah, so within the technical report, like you saw, it's 70 pages. So what we tried to do is actually provide the recommendation for adult size change table and the requirements that would come with it. So we suggest that they be adjustable in height, right? So depending on the individual and the caregiver assisting with them, to allow for that height difference or for an easier transfer, including going so far as to thinking about a ceiling lift. So if you need that additional assistance in the transfer, depending on the weight of the individual or the size of the individual needing care.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Cheryl.
Just following up on that too, I don't know if you've been and seen the new addition to the airport, what they've done with the washrooms there, how they are made for those with accessibility issues, where they actually have the handheld sprayers so that they can clean and do all that. Have we looked at that option as well?
Yeah, so those are the larger universal washrooms that are being incorporated to in airports. We didn't take into consideration that it's more of like a brand universal washroom. But that said, in the change rooms serving the pool, you actually have these individual shower rooms with an adult change table with a shower nearby, which could provide those services.
But I think it's a little bit different with the handheld, because this is actually for people that are by themselves that need that. So
yes, and that was one of the recommendations in that room, was to have a handheld shower head, but also something that's movable and more accessible, because the one that's currently provided is a little too high, or if someone left it in a higher position, it may be incapable for the next person to use.
So, and following up on that, when we are talking about heights, and it's something that Richard had brought up as having difficulty with sight, is there a you know, I know we're looking at making things more accessible, but are we letting people know that are blind that maybe they're lower than they can expect, or for those that are sight impaired is the correct term?
Yeah, that can be difficult. So anyone with low to no vision, there's so many things you can put in washrooms to make sure they're accessible. But in this case, because some of the washrooms actually offer, like, they're universal washrooms, so everything's contained within one room, it makes it easier for that individual to find everything. Now, if someone did have low or no vision, though, sometimes the expectation is that someone show them around the space so that they can get familiar with the space prior to actually going in and trying to navigate the spaces themselves, especially when there's so many things going on within a washroom or change room space.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I've got Jocelyn.
Thanks. I know I'm still a bit new to some of the facilities, but was the fitness center included in the assessment?
It was. And as you're aware, the fitness facility is actually on the second floor, which is not accessible. So we did kind of a preliminary RHFAC assessment, and that building would actually not be capable of getting certified due to that reason. So the suggestion was to provide another fitness space on the main level. But we also went so far as to recommend types of fitness equipment that could be provided for various people with different abilities and disabilities.
That's great. I'm glad to hear you did that. I'm really curious. I mean, I don't know if I'm 70 pages curious, but I'm curious to hear what some of the suggestions would be, because I know it's something that I just sort of assumed, you know, it would be about getting funding for an elevator or a stair lift or something to make that existing fitness center accessible. But I know it came up in a previous meeting where we talked a little bit about, like, moving the whole thing. So I'm curious, did you have any suggestions or thoughts about that you included in your report?
So at this time, we made the recommendations on basis of how you could improve the space or even just getting accessibility to the fitness space. As Lynn was saying, they have a meeting set up to go into this technical report a little bit deeper and figure out an implementation plan, at which point I'd be happy to provide more advice as to how to make that accessible if that were to form part of that plan.
Yeah, and also, if you just don't mind me butting in here.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Just a reminder that we also have a Bevan Park master plan that was completed a number of years ago. And in that plan, there is also a recommendation to build a weight room on the main level. Which is great. So in that case, if that were to happen,
they could already start with the recommendations made in the technical report, but we could always come back in at a later date and assist with that if need be.
Thank you. I'll move on to Adrian.
Thanks so much, Lynn. Thank you for the verbal report, and thanks so much, Samantha and Christina, for being here. I'm curious, just with the report, like knowing that the city is going to be reviewing and assessing, and then working up a financial plan and looking at that master plan alignment. Like, when you recommend, do you recommend like one thing for everything, or do you have like a best case scenario? And then like changes that could be made to make it somewhat more accessible, or like or is it more like the city would have to say, okay, we're going to pick this one, but not this one? And I just so appreciate that you went and did this on this facility. This is, you know, where my kids did all their swimming lessons, and it's also a city facility that my whole extended family couldn't go to together because of accessibility. Mm-hmm. So this is really lovely to know.
Yeah. So I think this report is more of a stepping stone. To really go in, get the space assessed, and just determine what's not compliant currently with current standards, including the RHFAC criteria. So where can they improve, and where can they go above and beyond the minimum? So therefore, wherever there was a non-compliant item, or even where the item wasn't necessarily provided, we chose to provide as many recommendations as we could, but they might not be tiered as per priority as of right now. But they certainly can be prioritized once there's more conversations and once you've actually reviewed to know where the building currently stands from an accessibility perspective.
Yeah, and I think that when the staff get together and have a meeting, that will be part of our process, is we'll create a strategy and we'll probably prioritize some of the recommendations.
Thank you. Sandra.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about priority, because obviously some are these long-term capital plans that need to be put into place, and there are some that could be done in short order. So that question has been answered. I'm sure not the scope of this, but piggybacking on the weather that we've had, and not about this facility, but about the NAC. A couple of years ago, my friend had a daughter with who needed a wheelchair and was unable to access the facilities because the snowplow moved the snow into the accessibility parking. And Jocelyn, I don't know if you've experienced that, but it is something that came to top of mind when we entered into this conversation, that accessibility means 4 seasons, not just you know, the planned weather. And I know that usually that's contracted out, but that was something that came to my mind. Thanks.
Yes, and I believe there is a small maintenance section in the accessibility report that speaks to that. So making sure that accessible paths of travel remain clear of elements, et cetera, and are maintained throughout the year. That's also something, again, I work all across Canada, and that's something we're starting to see in mandated legislation. And now that BC has legislation, that regulations should be coming out in the next year or two. So that's hopefully something that you'll see, and that way it's mandated and has to be taken care of.
Okay, I see Cheryl's hand up, but I got Jocelyn next on the speaker, and then you, Cheryl.
Thanks. I was just curious whether I haven't seen a report back from an RHFAC assessor in a long time, but does that a standard include other forms of inclusion, like gender neutral bathrooms and stuff like that? And what if anything did your report show?
Yeah, so our report did discuss gender neutral washrooms, universal washrooms, and because it's an existing building, there's only so many recommendations we can make before we actually request that the whole building be modified. But that said, I think the Bevan Park Pool does a pretty good job already, in that they do have that universal area that can be used by families with individual gender neutral enclosures that any person could use. And with the inclusion, they also have actual multi-stall washrooms and change rooms that are designated for females and males, right? So along with actual universal washrooms placed elsewhere. So I think the Bevan Park Pool does a pretty good job already in catering to that if the selection needed to be made.
Thank you. Cheryl.
I just wanted to touch on again about the sidewalks during the storm event. I live in the north end. We never saw a plow for 10 days on my street. And I was just driving on Uplands between Hammond Bay and Lake Quality Foods, which is a main road. You still can't go on the sidewalk. So I think that's something, unfortunately I missed the GPC because I had a legal appointment. I think that's something we as council have to push further. And then I was just reading the latest judgment out of the BC Court of Appeal, which now says basically that sidewalks are the municipality's responsibility, not people's, not the residents. So I think that's something we're going to have to really look carefully at, and maybe, and it's going to have to probably be an increase in taxes. And people get upset when we say that. But the problem being is we don't have a big snow budget, right? Like it's less than $1 million, and people were comparing us to Prince George. Well, they're a smaller community. Granted, they're up there and their snow budget's $8 million. So, I mean, that's something we have to really think about and look at. But I was also watching the video, I think it was Czech News that did it, with the man with the wheelchair that couldn't get any place. So I think this is something I would really like to see a recommendation come from this committee to mayor and council. We must do better on our snow clearing routes for those with accessibility and diversity needs. I think that's really important. Like I was thinking about, like I know people that have accessibility issues, it's really bad. Then you add a blind person that can't see the black items or can't see stuff. So I think it's something we really need to take more seriously. And I think it's, for me, I think it would be a really good recommendation coming from the committee, that it's been discussed and that the committee feels we can do a much better job. And if it means a tax increase, I think we're going to have to look at that and just have the guts to do it. Thank you. Thanks, Cindy.
Okay, Cheryl. Jocelyn. Oh, you're on.
I just wanted to respond to what Cheryl said. In this conversation about the report, my thought was that I'm curious if the cities has written policies about how snow removal contractors and where the snow is collected, and because we all know Sandra's comment happens a lot, and so I would welcome what Cheryl suggested as a committee talking about it, or making moving a motion to council to talk about it. I think we're only going to get more and more extreme weather, and it does have a huge impact on the mobility and inclusion of a lot of folks in our community. I mean, I think I have family I live with, I have a vehicle, and I was completely homebound for two and a half weeks because of snow. So I would certainly support that as something we took up. Thanks.
Thank you. And before we go to the other speakers, because we do have other items on the agenda, I think it's an excellent idea, Cheryl, but I think maybe we need to flush it out, and maybe we can discuss with Lynn and bring something back to the committee that would say, what would be our priorities? What would be perhaps a low-hanging fruit, like directing snowplow drivers, and many of the drivers are employees of our city. We don't contract out all the snow removal. I'm saying, watch out for the parking spaces that are for people with mobility issues. Make sure you do not pile the snow in that spot, right? I mean, there's simple things we can do, and then there's larger things that we need to look at as well. But in view of time and everything else, can I lay that on Cheryl, Lynn, and I to bring back to the next committee? Perfect. Thank you. Okay, I've got Adrian and then Sandra still with hands up.
Well, I was going to move a motion, but if you want to do it that way, that's great. I'd just like to see the committee do this before the end of our time as a committee. And yeah, I mean,
can I hear what your motion was?
I just scribbled quickly down. I move that council take action to increase accessibility for people of all abilities during heavy snowfall and other weather events. And maybe that's too specific, but round the clock. I mean, as I've said before at this committee, I have one family member who was completely homebound due to the weather. My other family member commutes to work walking and is a letter carrier. So, I mean, the mail was shut down, right? But I mean, he's still commuting to work walking. And so it's interesting to hear, like, I mean, because he'll get there and say, you know, yeah, well, this bus stop had snow pushed all around it, so no one could actually stand there. This area, you have to walk on the road. This area, you know, there's a blockage on the sidewalk. And so it's interesting to hear those things and you know, see that there's I mean, maybe you can't do everything, but there may be some things that can be done, just the way the snow is plowed, or, you know, high traffic areas, or just making sure people are not on the road, those kind of things. I'm happy to wait though. I'm not tied to this motion if people want to wait.
Okay, I'm going to go, I can see Karen putting her hand up in response. So Karen.
Hi there. I think that your idea, Madam Chair, is excellent, that if yourself and Councillor Armstrong, together with Lynn, have a bit of a preliminary discussion before any formal motions get made, because there's all kinds of other ramifications associated with it. And so I think it's just a tad premature to do those ones on the fly. So I think, you know, doing what you suggested would be the appropriate way to address it initially.
Okay. Thank you. But that was, hey, great for her on the fly for a motion. I liked it. Sandra.
I just wrote down what you said.
I was going to say that the scope is a little bit different here. So one of the scopes is maybe about accessibility to bus stops and so on, so that individuals can access public transit to meet their needs, their basic needs. For this scope, I think it is just to ensure that contractors and city staff recognize that snow removal needs to be done with accessibility in mind, so snowplows don't move onto spots where people need to utilize, and ramps are ensured that there's no ice and so on. So I think that for this, the scope is that, and then we need to address something else.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, I've got another hand. I've got Adrian.
Sorry,
and then we're going to move on.
Yeah, absolutely. I thank you so much for that, Sandra. And just, I mean, what I didn't capture in my motion is the plowing is typically done with vehicles in mind, right? And it's not happening for everybody's vehicle with accessibility in mind or with other modes of transportation in mind.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 5B, which is a verbal update on the banning conversion therapy. And Karen.
1 second, I just want to interrupt and thank Samantha and Christina for attending and answering the committee's questions. We really appreciate you coming.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much. And we had a great time doing this accessibility audit for you guys. So thank you for having us and inviting us to this committee meeting and answering your questions. And we look forward to potentially speaking again in the future. So thank you, Lynn and Lara.
Thank you. Thanks. And Happy New Year.
All right. Bye,
Thanks, everyone, for your time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Lynn. And now we'll move on to item 5B. And Karen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My verbal update will be very quick. Sort of at our last meeting, I had advised that there was going to be a report that was going to council because the bill to ban conversion therapy had, gone through the House, but it hadn't quite gone through Senate yet. So it was a actionable report whereby one of the options was to suggest that council write to the MP conveying council support for passing of it. But the CAO had pulled the report because things were moving quite quickly. So he wanted to give it at least another meeting to see what the progression was. And of course, as everybody probably is aware, on December 9th, royal assent was given and it is now into law. And therefore, given that it is in the Fed's bailiwick now, legislative legislatively, really, it is out of the hands of local government. But nonetheless, I still think it was really important that the rationale and the reasons of what we explored that I talked about last time, where we looked at, outright prohibition, business regulations, and land use regulations. I think that's still really important information for council to see, as well as members of the public and other communities who've been lobbying their local governments for the same thing. So it's basically just flipped a little bit, whereby that same information is being put out there, but it's in the form of an information only report. And that way it just closes the loop. But council will have the information, as will the public. So really, that's all I had to report on that.
Thank you very much. Did anybody have any questions, or we just want to celebrate? Raise our glasses.
The one thing that I will do is I always have to provide council with copies of the reports first, and once the agenda's been published, I can hand it out. So I'm happy to send the committee separately a copy of the info report that's going to be on the agenda, just so you've got it close at,
That's great. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.
Okay. Moving on to item number C, verbal update, transit stops. And Jamie.
Hi everybody, Happy New Year. Yeah, so this is also going to be a fairly quick and to the point update. We've talked about this kind of sporadically at the past couple of meetings, but want to definitely get into it. So I do have one task I want to get out of this, but first I'm going to sort of lay out my expectation of how we're going to do this. The task is going to be to identify or invite people to join a working group. And so in the next couple of weeks, I'd like to formalize that with some staff and possibly some representatives from the RDN. And then we can work through that and identify some of the concerns and the challenges we're facing right now, both for sort of our permanent or ultimate design standards for transit stops, as well as looking at some options for some of our stops that exist in undeveloped roads. We have a lot of roads that don't have sidewalks and just have shoulders, and we want to make sure that we develop a process for enhancing those to make sure that we can ideally tick all of the accessibility boxes, but definitely get as many as we can in a sort of financially practical way. And then integrate those into the system, into the walking and mobility system overall. And so I would expect, following those workshops, we would be able to generate a report to bring back to this committee for discussion and ideally endorsement, which we could then, I'm not sure if we would take it at that point to council, but I think we'd probably try and migrate it into our design standards for implementation across the city. So I expect that this is probably going to take the better part of the year, but I think we can fairly safely say that we can target a completion in the fall, so that we can wrap this up in line with the committee, because I think it probably concludes in line with the election, but I could be wrong. So, so if everybody is in support of that, I think that's how I'd like to approach it. And at this point, having spoken with Ledge Services, it sounds like we can have as many as 6 people from this committee participate on the working group. And so what I would ask is if you could email me, and if you don't have my email address, I think we can get that circulated, and then CC Sky and our Ledge Services folks, and we can sort of on a first come, first served basis, or if we really have high demand, we can probably triage it somehow. But yeah, everybody's interested. And I acknowledge that there's some people missing from today's meeting. So we'll have to, I think in fairness, we'll probably send out a more formal invitation to ensure that everybody has full awareness of what's going on and opportunity to participate. So yeah, like I said, quick and to the point, and if as long as everybody's feels that is going to get us where we'd like to be, then we'll carry on with that.
Does anyone have any questions? I think you've outlined it really good, Jamie. So everybody look forward for the email coming out. This will be incredibly important because I think part of this background is we're doing a whole review, aren't we, on our transit stops? This is part of.
Yeah, so we're, well, we are partnering with the RDN on the task that they've called the Transit Redevelopment Strategy. And so that's their sort of 5-year vision to move forward with transit expansions and optimizing some routing. And so we've actually been looking at that in concert with Reimagine and all the information gathered from that, and sort of assembling it and looking at, okay, the city's land use plans are these and the transit needs are these, and making sure that it all comes together. And so we're kind of going from that 50,000 foot down to 20,000 foot, and then this will be able to sort of help us get right down to the this potentially site by site amenities. So.
Thank you. Cheryl, did you have your hand up? No? Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Jamie.
No problem. Thanks.
And item 5D, the Bevan Social Center Outdoor Learning Center. And Lynn, you have a presentation.
I do, and just like last meeting, I'll try and share my screen. And if I don't have success, I have Laura on standby to back me up. So I'm hitting share. Can you see it?
No, yeah.
Okay, so now I'll just try and do the slideshow from the beginning. So you should on your screen now have Bevan Outdoor Learning Center.
Yes, we do.
Excellent. So on this first slide, what this picture is showing you is, I think it would be considered a northeasterly end of the Bevan Social Center. And at this end of the building is where we have our early years, preschool, and after school type programs. We have a special dedicated room at this end of the building. And although we don't have the entire site in this picture, you can see it's just pretty much a cement pad, the dead grass at this point in the year, and nothing really very appealing or motivating in that section of the building. And given that we've just been through a pandemic, we thought that it would be interesting and very useful to extend the indoor space into the outdoor area for a couple of reasons. One, to give some more outdoor activity space to all of the children who use those rooms, which is probably 90% of the use, but we can also accommodate some adult programming out in this outdoor space as well. And it gives us the opportunity to use the outdoors, but also spread people out more. And we wanted this space to be suitable for diverse abilities all the way from preschool to grade 7 mostly, is what we told the consultant who worked on a design for us, with some adult use in the evenings. And we wanted to include some equipment storage, but really integrate some more natural landscaping into the area and some natural play elements. And we wanted it to be very resilient and easy to maintain. So now I just want to show you what our design consultants came up with. Now, can you see my little arrow moving around on here? Okay, so what happens typically is parents drive through this road lane up here and drop the children off. And we've been having a lot more parents wanting to drop off through the pandemic rather than park and get their kids out of the car, all of their kids, because sometimes they're only dropping off one child and they have 1 or 2 other children in the car. So, it disappeared on me. Sorry about that.
Back.
I'll just get it back. I don't know why that happened. So we've integrated this drop-off area with a little arbor, and then it was typically right now it's just a straight shot down on a grade that is too large of a grade for accessibility purposes. So we have leveled out this grade right here and then made a 90-degree turn with enough space to make a path with a small enough grade that it can come all the way down and around and then access the level area. And then we have maintained some of the cement area over here for all of the more active and busy type of play that kids engage in, and including some riding of little scooters with wheels and whatnot, but also the ability to play street hockey type games. And then over here, we've created more of a quiet learning area with some low benches and a blackboard or a white board on the wall here so that we can actually go outside to do some learning. And then we've extended this path and created a platform that goes around. We have very large cherry trees there that we've decided to retain so that we also can create some small, more intimate, quiet areas. So we don't want this just to be accessible. We want it to be inclusive. We want it to be good for children who prefer to have more of a quiet type of play environment. And then we would be putting natural landscaping in on these slopes and maybe using some plants of interest like salal or Oregon grape or something where in part of the year those things would flower and maybe have some berries so the kids could smell the flowers or taste the berries. And then this area over here, all this yellow is like a fiber ground treatment like you would see under the playgrounds. It's like a manufactured wood fiber that compresses really nicely and people are able to access that quite easily. And then a little willow tunnel and some other just natural play features. This area here to the right is a maintenance access area. And then here's where we have some sheds and storage areas for if people are pushing in strollers or walkers or anything like that, they can be stored over here. So I just wanted to bring this design to the attention of the committee and take any questions or any input from you before we go to a stage where we're taking it to a more detailed design. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. I've got Jocelyn.
Thanks. It sounds like a really cool space. I wanted to flag something. I know that I've talked with some of you before about playgrounds. Is it structures that are tube-like structures do leave a lot of kids who can't bend down on their knees out, and kids who can't get out of their chairs. So I noticed in one area there were two suggestions. One was the Willow Tunnel and the other were little tree trunk tunnels. And my suggestion is that at least one of them needs to be at grade, like wheelable through, probably the Willow Tunnel, I would guess. Because speaking as an adult who was a kid in a wheelchair, if you can picture with me, you're chasing your friends and then they go through the tunnel and you can't, it sucks. I know it's a small thing, but if we're trying to be accessible, that would be a place to start. I have to trust that you guys know about grades and engineering, but it is a bit unfortunate that like you can't just wheel right all the way in. You have to separate off to go down the side ramp. But if it's not a big enough space for that, then it's not a big enough space, I guess. That was what came off the top of my head. So
Well, yes, and I think also one of the issues for us is all the roots of the trees. So in order to retain the trees, there's not a lot we can do with the ground. But I like the design. I think I think more people will end up using the curvy path because it'll have a great, more, it'll have a larger appeal, a more interest level than just the straight shot down, I think.
And it kind of facilitates movement across that upper level as well, which might have ordinarily been just a big long stripe of grass that would have been hard to wheel on. So
thank you. Sandra.
I heard about the plants such as berries and so on, but then I got distracted from a family logistical question. And what I was curious about, I know my children do a lot of Indigenous outdoor learning at their school, and it's amazing when I'm walking through paths that they say they use this plant and boiled the root and they used it for this purpose and so on. So I'm just curious whether it would be interesting as an outdoor learning experience to have some of those plants and be able to have Indigenous educators be able to provide that, because it is amazing from a parent perspective to be able to go on a nature walk and they can identify plants and what they were used for in Indigenous culture. And the other thing, it sounds horrible. I love the blackboard, whiteboard idea. I'm just wondering if it's going to be locked up at night.
Well, we didn't think that far ahead. There's a fence and a gate around it, and whether or not it'll be locked up, I don't know, but the fence isn't even really so high that it would prevent people from climbing over it. So we would have to be thoughtful about how we do that, and maybe even cover it with, you know, a cupboard that closes or something.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I love the idea, the concept of, you know, educating outside, and the blackboard is a really cool idea. I just kind of think of after hours activities and.
Yep. Good thinking.
Thank you. Well, that was a great presentation. I look forward to that. So we'll move on to number 6A, which is the 2021 annual report for the advisory committee, and Lynn.
Thank you. So I just went through all of our minutes from last year and put together this report. I noticed, I think I have the name of somebody, a committee member on here who's no longer a committee member, which I meant to take off of the report. So I've already noticed that, but I just was hoping everyone had a chance to review this and let me know if they think that I've missed anything or if there are any changes required before we send it off for Mayor and Council's information.
I'm looking for feedback from the committee. If anybody has any additions, or you always forget how much you actually do.
Yes, it's been, this committee has accomplished a lot in a year.
Right, Rachel.
I read through it a few days ago, but I don't remember everything, but I thought it looked good at the time of reading.
Thank you. Do we need a motion for this, Lynn?
Recommendation is that the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness review this report and recommend Council receive it for information. So yes, I believe we need a motion.
Okay. Who would like to make that motion?
Zenny?
What?
Question, this is Sarah.
Oh, hi. I'm looking in the, I'm trying to find you on the Zoom.
I'm right here.
Okay, there you are.
Yeah, I figured now's a good time to ask this question. In the report, I can't recall, and I'm sorry, I can't recall, but I thought maybe I'd ask now. Was there any mention of the recommendation that we did as a committee of council to recommend that the council, it was regarding use of language and gender, and then I know that went to staff, and I then reached out to staff last fall or early winter to check in on the progress, but there was no update. So I was just wondering if there was a mention of it in the report at all. Yeah.
Yes, there is a mention of it in the report, and I do have an update on that topic for later on the agenda tonight.
Oh, great, thanks.
Okay. So can I get a mover for the recommendation? So moved by Rachel, seconded by Adrian, and all those in favor. Anybody opposed? Carries unanimously, if I can say that right. Thank you very much. So now we're moving on to the draft 2022, our work plan. And over to you again, Lynn.
You'll be sick of me by the end of this meeting. So I've drafted up a work plan for 2022 based on information from our 2021 report and some of our outstanding items that haven't been completed yet. And I did leave some blank spaces in this report for additional items. And so I'm just looking to the committee to find out, on top of the item of the guiding principles summary, which we agreed at a previous meeting we would carry forward into 22, continuing to assist in the Reimagine Nanaimo project and providing input into that, and continuing to review and provide input into city projects or anything that comes from mayor and council. Is there anything else the committee would like to see added onto the work plan?
I've got Jocelyn.
Thanks. One thing that it's come up in a few peripheral ways, but I'd really like to talk about this city and its sort of guidelines and bylaws for accessible parking, and in terms of the different contexts in which accessible parking exists around the city, private, like shopping center lots versus city-owned lots, and if there's any ways to improve on the design standard that we're using. I know Spark BC recently was part of a collaboration with them where they assessed different models and standards, CSA standard and AODA standards for accessible parking. And what we realized was with vehicles getting larger and more types of accessible vehicles, a lot of the old accessible parking spaces simply aren't accessible for a side entry vehicle. So I'd be just interested to hear a report about it, or to see if there's any input or support we can offer to increase the accessibility of parking in Nanaimo.
Thank you, Jocelyn. And you made a note of that, Lynn?
Yes.
And it just dawned on me, I have no knowledge of this. What about electric cars or electric vans? And is there I never thought about it until just now.
It is something that's come up among at least the community that I support and am part of. I know that BC Hydro, I think, there's been some work. A group was consulting with them about how policy could be shaped in order to be inclusive of drivers with disabilities who have electric cars, but it's still a pretty small group. So.
Right. And Adrian.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really glad that Sarah brought up the motions from May 26th, because I did see them within the subjects examined by committee in the 2021 report. And then I also noticed that they are in the outstanding motions at the end. And I'd really like to see those or some of those incorporated into 2022. I'm feeling when I look at it that we've got a real, we're leaning very, very far over into physical accessibility. And I think we need to really show with that 2022 work plan that
inclusive.
Yeah, we're inclusive in more than only that way, although it is really important. And I'm just wondering too if something around the motion we talked about at the beginning of the meeting around snow and accessibility, if that could be reflected somehow.
Okay. Cheryl.
Just wanted to follow up on the accessibility when we're talking about electric vehicles. I think that's something, I don't know if we've ever addressed it, but are we looking at that when we do install city or whatever owned chargers? So maybe that's something that, I don't know, perhaps Jamie can answer.
I saw Jamie just pop on.
There he is.
Popping out of the shadows here. So completely on board with diving into this. We do have requirements for off-street parking space locations and sizes, or orientations. Maybe we don't explicitly stipulate where accessible spots are, and I know that's something that's been brought to my attention before, and so I have sort of planted the seed regarding, or catalyzed by other discussions, to reopen that bylaw and have a look at it. It is fairly new, the one that we're dealing with right now, and I actually just learned this morning that we did a minor amendment late last year, but that's, and then with respect to on-street, I think that to be quite frank, that we need to have a fairly broad discussion about parking in general. You know, the use and proximity and criteria for accessible spots, access to for voting. Normally, there's a whole gamut of things that I think we need to get some direction from the community on, because we are starting to see some pressure points around the city that we do need to manage. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents.
But are we looking at, though, when we put the electric chargers in, are they accessible for people that have a wheelchair?
I don't know, to be honest. I think right now we have not had the discussion about a accessible electric car. I mean, right now we still have a very, very low uptake on EVs in general. I think we're maybe at 1% or 0.5% for all of Nanaimo. And so we do, and I don't have that at my fingertips right now, but we do have some plans to develop a bit of an EV strategy in concert with our IT department. Kind of an odd mix, but there is a method to the madness. And so I can't remember if that's this year or next year, but all of these things are becoming more and more intertwined, and we really do need to make sure that we are cognizant of how they play together and make sure that we do support this across the board. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra.
Love how I keep on piggybacking off of everyone's ideas. I honestly heard them while they're saying them. But Adrian brought up a good point. So when I look at the work plan, I noticed under Parks and Rec, we talk about accessibility, but what's absent is programs and services. So it seems to be more a focus on physical versus programs and services. So as an example, I have a child with diverse needs. I don't know whether I could register her into a certain program or service, and maybe that's part of a communication with the program and guide and so on, but it's kind of how do we communicate accessibility to programs and services and make them more accessible. And so I just wouldn't mind adding that in.
Thank you. Rachel.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we could include on our work plan for this year, if we have space, continuing to talk about the EV charging station, because like you said, there aren't a lot of people with EVs right now, but in 5 years there might well be. And as the population ages, we'll have more and more people with disabilities, and you know, the aging population is probably more likely to have money than say people my age. So they're probably the ones going to be buying the EVs. So I was just thinking, like, if somebody puts this in their plans now, they can have it legislated and made so that in 5 years there's not like a big problem. You know, just putting it in the work plan for now would be good.
Thank you. I think Lynn's capturing all of this. Eileen.
Just wondering, I'm really happy that we have closed captioning on Zoom for these meetings and everything. And I noticed on the the city website, most everything is closed captioning, but Shaw is not closed captioning. So I brought that up like way back when, and I still want to put it on the agenda. I still think that Shaw should be doing their part of it for accessibility too, and I think the city needs to put pressure on them.
And I don't know if Sky actually would have, but Eileen, I have been following up with this at City, and apparently they're working on it. It's supposed to be coming. Sky, did you know? Sky knows a little bit.
Yeah, okay. I approached them in 2017 about it, but.
Sky, what did you know about it? Did you hear that, Eileen?
No, I didn't.
Oh, that is supposed to be coming to us in a finance and audit report. And so there's probably money associated with it, I imagine.
Yes, there is, yes.
Well, I won't say anything because I don't know what the costs are yet. So I was going to say something. So left over from 2021 and to what Sarah was speaking to earlier was that outstanding recommendation regarding the gender neutral language, etc. And I don't think we ever moved anything forward to council, but I think it's something that maybe we need to have more conversation at the committee or what. When I looked at these directions, I can see, for instance, update and revise all print and electronic materials. Well, maybe moving forward, we could say new materials or something. These types of recommendations that come to council, immediately they're just going to say how much this has cost before they even get into the general idea. So Lynn, what were your ideas on it?
Okay, so I have an update about those recommendations actually from May the 26th. So information was taken forward to mayor and council, and what is a whole bunch of no wait, let me make sure I'm telling you the truth.
I'm trying to remember.
I don't think they made it to mayor and council. What happened is it went to HR. And so some staff in HR started to do a bunch of research around these recommendations, and they presented them to the senior management team. And a report was mostly written, but then the senior management team decided that before the report comes to mayor and council, they want to bring somebody in to do some gender and diversity and inclusion training for mayor and council and the senior leadership team and some senior staff so that they are more well-informed to prepare this report and bring it forward with some good recommendations. So that's where it's sitting right now, is they're arranging for somebody to come in and do this training of these key staff.
Okay. Thank you. I knew there was something in the mix and I just didn't want us to lose it. Cheryl.
I also know there's a legal challenge right now on this because the courts had mandated that lawyers have to use the pronouns or whatever. And many are upset about it because some say they don't want to have to self-identify. So there is a legal challenge. So I think we should wait to see what happens with that before we really go off until we see what happens. Because I know that in talking to a couple counselors, there's reservations around that as well. So I think that'll be really important to see what happens with the legal challenge.
In the meantime, a little bit of training wouldn't hurt.
Oh, the training is definitely required regardless of what the legal challenge is. I think it's really important that we actually get more training because I agree with what's been said. You know, a lot of the stuff that we focus on is accessible, right? Because in some respects, it's easier because you can physically do it or you physically can't. And I think we need a lot more education on that. I know when we heard from the Risebridge group, you know, like some of the issues that we hear, my niece has a friend that's non-binary, and just listening to the struggles that she relays to us, it's really sad that these kids don't get support. And I think one of the reasons they don't is not enough of us know enough about the issues. So I'm all for more training on that.
Adrian.
Thanks so much, everybody. Yeah, just in regards to the cost, I know that will obviously come up, and we'll come up with lots of different projects. And just wanted to say that I really see that, you know, a big part of our job as a committee is to illuminate that exclusion has a cost as well, and to walk alongside council and staff in a collaborative way so that we can work together to reduce the ways we're excluding. And I just so appreciate this group for that.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thank you. Yeah, this is great to hear the update. Because basically, as I recalled, that there was some review process, and in speaking with the city member who I reached out to, I was told that they were looking at the feasibility and wanting to prepare a report. So that's sort of what's been shared here. And yes, that I love that to hear that the council or I don't know if staff in different departments are also looking at doing the diversity training, the inclusivity and gender competency training, but that would be good. And I would hope that happens quickly so that this can move forward.
Yeah.
As Adrian had pointed out, there is a cost to not being inclusive. And so as the city continues on with business, in one of my other roles as a support worker for the gender diverse community in Nanaimo, I hear a lot from my clients that they don't feel welcome or that they're very hesitant and have a lot of anxiety accessing different city services or locations in the city because they just don't know if they're welcome. They don't know if they would be not having a space for them. So that can be extremely, that can be a really big problem. That's a really big issue I think that we have, which was what led to moving the recommendations and putting them forward. And I'm glad that there's still with staff, and I'm glad that there's still staff working on it. I really hope that moves forward. I'd really love to see it move forward and not just peter out. That's all.
I agree with you, Sarah. Rachel.
I was wondering if there's space on the agenda for this committee to discuss accessing housing this year, because that's both inclusivity and accessibility related. Like there's lots of people who can't access housing because of money concerns, and you know, landlords are less likely to rent to people who are Indigenous, who are Black, especially if they have tattoos or disabled, if they're disabled or if they have pets. So I'm just saying, like, I think that'd be great if this committee could sort of touch on that this year.
If I can ask you, Rachel, when housing is such a broad, are you talking affordability? Are you talking physically able to do it? Are you talking discrimination against various marginalized
all
people?
Of it.
Or all of it?
It's all a problem.
Okay. I'll refer to Lynn on that one, and she can get back to us. Deborah.
Hi, thank you so much, Rachel, for raising that as an issue. I just wanted to let people know as well that the city is involved in a number of, they're doing a number of, involved in a number of working groups that are looking at some of those issues. Not all of them, Rachel, but quite a number of them. And I just think it's important that be put out there, that there is a number of, and nonprofits who are working in the area. So there's the CAB committee, there's the Nanaimo Housing Association. All of those are places where the city is sitting, not always as a voting member, but often sitting and certainly hearing about the issues. So just there is that there. I think it might be useful if Sky or somebody from the city could compile a list of what the city is already doing in this area as it relates to community connection. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I am going to be reaching out to this committee to become involved in some of those other activities that are happening in our community, because we are looking for representation from diverse community and members as it relates to some of the issues that you've raised, Rachel. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Excellent, Deborah. I think that would really serve the purpose. Jocelyn.
Just piggybacking on Rachel's suggestion, I think I would love to see this committee just as an ongoing, as part of the profile of this committee, portfolio of this committee, is to regularly check in with any housing related efforts, part of Reimagine, or I know David presented back to us at the last meeting, because housing is such an important issue for Nanaimo, but also for accessibility and inclusiveness. So just like, if there's no other activity to consult us about in the year, that we would just receive a report, verbal or otherwise, to let us know kind of where those activities are at. Because I think I foresee that will come up really every year, that it's such an important issue and it affects so many people that we're going to bring it up again and be like, what are we doing on housing? So why don't we just be, proactive about connecting on it every year then?
Okay, thank you. Do I have anybody else with contributions for 2022 work plan? Lynn?
Can I just maybe quickly review the list that I have and make sure I've captured everything?
Okay, and we probably don't want to add too much more.
I think a couple of these will easily be managed through inviting city staff to come in and do presentations, because, for example, we're doing a lot of work on accessible housing. And so here's what I got out of this conversation so far. Accessible parking, and I'm including in that guidelines, bylaws, EV charging stations, improvements to design standards, and consideration for electric cars and vans. I think we can deal with all of that as one topic. I have following through on the gender motions from 2021. I have accessible programs and services, which is another one I think we could easily bring in some of our recreation coordinator staff to do a presentation on what we currently have and here's some input from the committee. I have accessible housing. And then I wrote this, snow accessibility. And then this one, I wasn't sure, do I need to include the Shaw closed captioning services in the work plan? I heard that it's being addressed, so.
I think it's being worked on.
Okay.
Unless I found some type of hiccup, we could bring it back, but right now, from my understanding, it's in the works.
Okay, so those are the items that I heard that I can add to the work plan, and then what I would do is update it, bring it back to the next committee meeting in February for approval to go forward to Mayor and Council. Okay.
Does anybody have any further questions on that? Oh, looking good. Now, wow, we're doing really, we've got meetings where we couldn't fit it all in, and now we're doing really well and everybody's going to go home early. Did we ever get the verbal update for the water feature review?
We did not, so I can do that now if you like.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this committee was invited to participate in a workshop in November or December where we were showing the concept design for replacement of the boat at the Nanaimo Aquatic Center with some new water features. And I believe it was Rachel and Adrian who attended that meeting. Was there anyone else? I think it was just the two committee members. And so our aquatics manager presented the new concept design and the new water features. And then Adrian and Rachel asked a lot of questions and provided some really good input. And so the consultant was there and they have received all of that input and they'll now be considering that as they move into detailed design. So this is, I believe it's scheduled to take place in 23, that the boat, which is very old and needs to be replaced, will be removed and then replaced with the other features, which are like the best way to describe it is they're meant to what's the word, like look like a rainforest and create this rainforest idea, like people are walking into a rainforest and there's misters and water dripping down and tall structures that look sort of like trees, and yeah, and a variety of other features that are all meant to give it a really natural forest, walk through the forest sort of a look. And I don't know if Adrian or Rachel, if either of you would like to add anything to that.
Oh, you know, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for that. And did anybody else have anything else they wish to bring up? Because I think we're at the end of our agenda. Rachel.
I was just curious, is the city planning to give an update in a few months on how reviewing the LEAP program is going? Because like I know they did most of the review previously, but there's a couple items they were still working on.
I'll refer to Lynn.
Yes.
I thought we had approved it.
We still have some outstanding recommendations that we weren't able to fully implement in 2021. And so Lara and her business services team, they're doing some research and a couple of rec coordinators around the outstanding recommendations, and we will be bringing those back forward to the committee. Yeah.
Okay, because actually the majority of it we were fine with, so it must be just a couple of outstanding.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay, coming back.
And just so you know, actually, something that emerged in the last couple of months is we realized there was a really old LEAP policy that existed, and based on the work that we did on the LEAP review last year, Karen Robertson, who was here earlier from Ledge Services, advised that we needed to update that policy. So we've just rewritten the policy, and that'll be going forward to Mayor and Council for approval. But it's very straightforward and covers the basics. It means we're still doing the other research on the other recommendations, despite the fact that that policy is coming forward.
Okay. So, with nothing further, I guess I'm looking for a move to adjourn. Okay. Thank you very much for the reminder. Okay, I think I got moved by Cheryl, seconded by Jocelyn. All those in favor? Wow. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.